and several other committees in the House, 4 bills have been passed since then to enable the increase in domestic oil production. Those 4 bills have been not just passed committees, they've passed the full House. They're sitting in the Senate, where there is no intention to touch those bills anytime they're in the 112th Congress. Because the White House has said if those bills pass the Senate, they will be vetoed. Now here's something that energy people don't get. And I'm an energy person, all kinds of energy. I'm not only committed to oil and gas, I'm committed to wind and solar and biofuels and geothermal and hydrogen and nuclear and you name it. Because we need all the energy that we can produce in order to keep energy affordable, available, and sustainable in this country. But here's something that energy people really need to come to grips with. And I don't really speak just to the energy community, I speak to the general public when I say this. The top priority, the #1 responsibility, the absolute must-do in the energy space today is energy executives and energy employees need to come to grips with the fact that something has changed in their business model that they try to avoid, that they tend to ignore, that they'd rather not deal with, but I'm suggesting they must. What every energy company has to figure out is how they're going to deal with the #1 challenge to their business. The #1 issue that will enable their business or disable their business. And that is, how do they come to grips with the public policy aspect of their work? The days of the wildcatter, independent and free, are history. The interests of society and the interests of the public policy apparatus in this country now go directly from the State House or the Capitol to every well that's drilled. There's no free market for energy anymore, ladies and gentlemen. That shocks people sometimes when I say that. But the free market is history for energy. All kinds of energy, not just oil and gas. There's no free market for energy because absolutely every determined decision to increase or to produce energy is limited by public policy acceptance. Whether that's the permit or the license, or whether that's the acceptance by a community or by a government in that community of the building of infrastructure, a pipeline, a transmission line, a wind tower, a storage tank, a gas station. Every aspect of energy is governed and regulated now. It's not a free market. And for energy company executives who are trying to decide how to utilize their financial capital or how to deal with the growth of their business and the return on investment and the profitability of the firm, my suggestion to all of those energy executives is start with the biggest obstacle and the biggest issue you face. Start with the public policy aspect of it. Because if you don't manage that, you don't have a business. And there's a secondary knock-on effect of dealing with the public policy aspect of energy. The knock-on effect is we live in a democracy. And most elected officials who serve the public reactively. In other words, they want to know what the public thinks. And if the energy companies of today and tomorrow don't operate in such a way so as to impact what the public thinks, then they will get the negative reaction of the elected or appointed officials who respect the public more than they do the energy executives. Because it's not the energy executives that put them in office, is it? It's the public. And so we have a big miss here, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, think about this for a moment. Along comes somebody like me, could have been anyone else that made the testimony, 3 million jobs. Who would not jump at 3 million new jobs. The Senate and the Senate and the President won't jump. The President's on a bus today in the Midwest trying to pump up the people of the Midwest. But he's denying the opportunity for the people of the Midwest to make steel, to make parts, to make supplies, to build the American energy infrastructure in a way that's materially impactful and will have long-lasting implications on energy security, national security, revenue to the federal government, quality of life, security of the nation. What is going on here? How could we not jump at a 3 million job opportunity? Well, much of the public doesn't want to see drilling. Much of the public thinks drilling is nasty, dirty, and we don't want to take the risks of drilling. Well, you're in a town that understands those risks. There's a convention going on next door where people's livelihoods welcome the risks because they know and understand the risks are manageable. How come the public doesn't understand those risks are manageable? We haven't explained it. We in the energy industry haven't explained it. The most boneheaded decision made in the White House in the year 2010 was to shut down the Gulf of Mexico following the BP disaster. The BP disaster is unforgivable and tragic and desperately harmful. And those who died and those who were injured and the environmental devastation that followed was because a company failed to manage its risk profile. And all the warnings were ignored. But does that warrant shutting down 33 other deep water rigs, which remain essentially shut down over a year later? And we're now entering phase 3 of the moratorium, which will extend it into 2012, 2013, during which time production from the Gulf of Mexico will decline, I estimate, by 1 million barrels a day, having consequences on the crude oil price, having consequences on the president's re-election because of the gasoline price, having consequences on the nation's economy because those high gasoline prices suck disposable income right out of people's wallets and purses or checking accounts. And then they can't buy the things because they have to pay so much for that gasoline. And it will be ever higher over the 2011, 2012, 2013 time frame, because it's not just the U.S. decline of production that's driving the crude price higher. It's the Chinese and Indian appetite for more oil and gas to fuel their economic growth. I'll come back to that in a moment. But the boneheaded decision I'm referring to was a decision made in order to make a political statement about how the White House and how this president sees the future of drilling in this country. Not very positively. And it comes right back to the point I'm making that the industry and the executives in the industry have got to come to grips with. If they want a successful business going forward, they have a primary duty and a primary responsibility to the people of America and to the elected and appointed officials of America at state and local and federal levels to better understand what we're doing here. And we don't have a very good track record of the energy companies expressing themselves transparently, publicly, frequently, to stand the test of public scrutiny. Why not? Well, I was an insider. I wrote a book called Why We Hate the Oil Companies. And in that book I describe, not with names, but with stories, some of the attitudes and comments at the highest level of the executive committee of the American Petroleum Institute, where one executive in particular said, "John, I hear what you're saying, but frankly, John, if the Americans don't want my gas,